The email confirming Jennifer Hayes had just secured the $700 million pharmaceutical contract sat unread in her inbox, buried beneath spam, while outside her bedroom window, her husband Derek threw her clothes, her mother's jewelry box, and her college diplomas into the February snow, laughing as his mistress Brittany filmed it all on her phone. Jennifer, her plus-size frame trembling in the doorway, clutched the divorce papers he'd just served her. Papers she hadn't seen coming despite 12 years of marriage. Papers that legally stripped her of everything they'd built together. But Derek had no idea that the overweight wife he was humiliating, the woman whose belongings he was destroying in front of their horrified neighbors, had spent the last 3 years secretly developing a cancer treatment protocol that would change modern medicine forever. The joint bank account he'd already drained that morning, every penny of their savings gone to fund his wedding to Brittany next month, seemed like the final insult. But what Jennifer did next would transform her from the ridiculed, discarded wife into something her husband never imagined possible. Would Derek discover what he'd just thrown away before it was too late? Would Brittany's cruel laughter freeze in her throat when Jennifer's true value became impossible to ignore? And what exactly was waiting in that unread email that would turn Jennifer's worst day into her most powerful weapon? Jennifer Hayes watched her wedding album land in a snowdrift, its white leather cover already soaking through, the careful calligraphy of their names bleeding into nothing. She stood in the doorway of the colonial house she'd helped buy with her pharmaceutical research salary, her soft body shaking not just from the cold, but from the systematic destruction of her entire life happening in real time. Derek moved with purpose, his athletic frame easily hoisting box after box, his face twisted with something that looked almost like joy as he hurled her possessions into the yard. "Derek, please," Jennifer managed, her voice cracking. "Can we just talk about this?" That's when Brittany stepped forward, her thin figure wrapped in the cashmere coat Jennifer had always admired in store windows, but never bought for herself. The younger woman's perfect face contorted with contempt as she gathered saliva in her mouth and spat directly at Jennifer's feet. The glob landed on Jennifer's worn house slippers, and Derek's laughter rang out sharp and cruel in the winter air. "Talk?" Derek's voice dripped with mockery as he hoisted another box. "What's there to talk about, Jen? Look at you. Really look at yourself." He gestured at her body with disgust. "I've been pretending for years. Pretending I didn't notice how you let yourself go. Pretending I didn't cringe every time we had to go out in public together. Pretending I could stand to touch you." Jennifer's hand instinctively went to her stomach, covering it protectively. She'd gained weight after her second miscarriage 5 years ago, then more after the third. Derek had sworn it didn't matter, had held her through those dark nights, had promised they'd get through it together. But standing here now, watching him destroy everything with Brittany's hand possessively on his shoulder, Jennifer realized those promises had already been lies. "I gave you 12 years, Jennifer whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I worked 2 jobs to put you through business school. I supported your startup when everyone said it would fail. You were convenient," Derek interrupted, his handsome face cruel in the afternoon light. "Your salary was convenient. This house was convenient. But convenience isn't enough anymore, Jen. Brittany makes me feel alive. She's beautiful, successful, and she actually takes care of herself." Brittany preened under the compliment, her manicured fingers running through her highlighted hair. She was everything Jennifer wasn't: thin, polished, confident in her sexuality. At 28, she was also 8 years younger than Jennifer and worked as Derek's executive assistant at the tech company Jennifer's money had helped him build. "The divorce papers are in order," Derek continued, tossing Jennifer's childhood teddy bear into the snow without ceremony. "My lawyer made sure of it. Clean break. You get nothing from the business. It's in my name only. The house goes on the market tomorrow. And that joint account?" He pulled out his phone, showed her the banking app with a balance of $0. "Already transferred to my personal account this morning. Consider it compensation for having to pretend to be attracted to you for a decade." Jennifer felt her knees weaken. That account had held $43,000, her emergency fund, her safety net, her escape plan if things ever got bad. She'd been adding to it slowly, methodically for years. Now it was gone. That's illegal, Jennifer said, her voice gaining unexpected strength. That's our marital property. You can't just... Can't I? Derek's smile was vicious. I already did. Sue me if you want. But we both know you can't afford a lawyer good enough to beat mine. You're broke, Jennifer. Homeless by tomorrow. Alone. He paused, letting each word land like a punch. Maybe this will finally motivate you to lose some weight and become someone worth wanting. The neighbors had gathered now. Mrs. Patterson from next door, with her hand over her mouth. The Johnsons standing frozen on their porch. Young teenagers from down the street recording everything on their phones. Jennifer's humiliation was complete in public and would live forever on the internet. Brittany stepped closer, her expensive perfume overwhelming Jennifer's senses. Oh, and Derek and I have decided to be generous, she said, her voice saccharine. We're inviting you to our wedding next month. Front row seat. We thought you'd want to witness Derek finally marrying someone worthy of him. Someone who can actually make him happy. Someone who isn't a disgusting fat cow. Derek laughed again, loud and genuinely amused. That's brilliant, babe. Jen, you'll come, right? It's February 28th at the Riverside Country Club. The same place we got married, actually. Seems poetic. Jennifer looked between them, these two people who were systematically destroying her with such evident pleasure. And something inside her that had been bending under the weight of their cruelty finally snapped. Not into pieces, but into a different shape entirely. Something harder, something they would come to regret creating. I'll be there, Jennifer heard herself say, her voice eerily calm. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Derek's eyebrows rose slightly, surprised by her acquiescence. But then he shrugged and went back to throwing her life into the snow. Jennifer turned and walked back into the house, her house, for just a few more hours, and climbed the stairs to her home office. Her laptop sat on the desk where she'd left it that morning, before Derek had ambushed her with divorce papers and Brittany's presence and the systematic destruction of everything she thought was permanent. She opened her email, intending to contact her friend Lisa, who was a divorce attorney, when she noticed the unread message in her inbox. The subject line made her breath catch. NIH Contract Award Notification, Hayes Cancer Protocol Study. Jennifer's finger trembled as she clicked it open. She'd submitted her research proposal 6 months ago, a comprehensive study on a novel immunotherapy approach she'd been developing for 3 years in her spare time while working full-time at Medcore Pharmaceuticals. The work was good. She knew it was good, but she'd never expected. The number swam in front of her eyes. $700 million. A 7-year contract to develop, test, and bring to market her revolutionary cancer treatment protocol. Full funding for lab space, research staff, clinical trials, everything. It was the kind of contract that made careers, that changed lives, that appeared in medical journals and on news programs. The email had arrived at 9:47 that morning. Derek had served her with divorce papers at 10:15. He'd been throwing her belongings in the snow since 11 for 3 hours while he'd mocked her body and stolen her money and invited her to watch him marry his mistress. Jennifer Hayes had been one of the most valuable pharmaceutical researchers in the country, and he had absolutely no idea. Jennifer sat very still, reading the email 3 times to make sure it was real, that she wasn't hallucinating from shock. But it was there, solid and official and life-altering. The contract coordinator wanted to schedule a meeting for next week to discuss the preliminary phases. They were ready to move forward immediately. They believed her work would save hundreds of thousands of lives. Outside, Derek was still laughing, still throwing her things away like they meant nothing. Like she meant nothing. Jennifer looked down at her body, the body he'd just called disgusting, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power. Not despite her weight, but independent of it entirely. Her value had never been tied to Derek's approval or Brittany's contempt or society's beauty standards. Her value was in her mind, her dedication, her years of tireless work that had just culminated in the opportunity of a lifetime. Jennifer opened a new browser tab and searched for the best divorce attorney in the state. Money was no longer an object. Then she searched for personal stylists, not to lose weight for Derek's approval, but because she was about to step into a world where image mattered for business reasons. Then she searched for real estate agents specializing in luxury properties. If Derek wanted the house, he could have it. She'd buy something better, something he could never afford. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Be out by tonight or I'm calling the cops. And take your fat-ass clothes with you. Brittany's already burned most of them, but there's a pile left." Jennifer looked at the message and smiled. She responded with just 2 words. "See you at the wedding." She had 1 month to transform from the humiliated, discarded wife into something Derek would never recover from seeing. Not a revenge fantasy about weight loss. She was done caring what Derek thought about her body. This was about showing him exactly what he'd thrown away, while he'd been too busy obsessing over superficial appearances to recognize the brilliant, accomplished, valuable woman he'd married. Jennifer made a call to the NIH coordinator, confirmed the meeting for Monday, then called the divorce attorney whose reputation for absolutely destroying overconfident husbands in court was legendary. By the time Derek came back inside to throw her out for the last time, Jennifer had already set in motion a series of events that would turn his February wedding into the worst day of his life. She packed only what mattered, her research notes, her laptop, her mother's letters, and left everything else for Derek to deal with. As she drove away in her modest sedan, she didn't look back at the house or the snow-covered yard or Derek's triumphant figure in the doorway with Brittany's arms around his waist. She had work to do, a future to build, and a wedding to attend that would change everything. The law offices of Victoria Martinez occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown skyscraper, all glass and chrome, and the kind of quiet that came from extremely expensive carpeting. Jennifer sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her destroyed wardrobe, watching the city spread out below through floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd taken a hotel room the night Derek threw her out, spent the morning at her meeting with the NIH coordinators, and now still riding the surreal wave of her life's complete demolition and reconstruction, she was about to make Derek's betrayal very, very expensive for him. Victoria Martinez was exactly what Jennifer had hoped for. Sharp-eyed, immaculately dressed, with the kind of smile that suggested she genuinely enjoyed destroying men who underestimated their wives. She sat across from Jennifer now, reading through the divorce papers Derek had served with barely concealed delight. "This is amateur hour," Victoria said, tapping a manicured nail on the document. "Your husband's lawyer is either incompetent or your husband lied about your assets. There's no mention of intellectual property, no investigation of separate contributions to marital property, and the division he's proposed is laughably one-sided." She looked up at Jennifer. "Tell me everything." Jennifer told her. The 12 years of marriage, the money she'd spent putting Derek through business school, the startup she'd funded with her salary while Derek built his tech company, the miscarriages and the weight gain, and Derek's increasingly cruel comments over the past 2 years. Then she told her about Brittany, about the joint account, about the public humiliation and the destroyed belongings, and the wedding invitation designed to torture her. Victoria's expression grew colder with each detail, but when Jennifer mentioned the $700 million contract, the lawyer's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "And this contract was awarded based on your independent research? Work you did separately from your employment at Medcore?" "Yes," Jennifer confirmed. "I own the intellectual property. I developed the protocol on my own time using my own resources. Medcore has no claim to it. I made sure of that from the beginning." "So this is entirely separate property from your marriage?" "Completely separate. But," Jennifer hesitated, "the preliminary research I did 5 years ago, some of that was funded with money from our joint account. I used about $15,000 of our savings for lab equipment and materials before I realized the potential and separated everything." Victoria's smile could have cut glass. "Even better. So there's an argument that your husband's marital assets contributed to the development of this protocol, which means he has a claim to a portion of its value, except he just forfeited all claims to marital property by stealing from your joint account and attempting to defraud you in the divorce." She leaned forward. "Jennifer, by the time I'm done with Derek, he's going to wish he'd stayed married to you and treated you like the golden goose you are." "I don't want his business," Jennifer said quickly. "I don't want anything that's his. I just want what's mine, and I want him to understand what he did." "Oh, he'll understand," Victoria assured her. We're going to file a counter petition immediately. We'll document the theft from the joint account, the destruction of your personal property, and the systematic financial abuse. Then we're going to make sure every penny you put into his business school and his startup gets accounted for with interest. You said you have records? Jennifer pulled out a folder she'd grabbed from her home office the night before. Inside were bank statements, tuition receipts, business loan documents with her name as co-signer, proof of every dollar she'd invested in Derek's success while he was busy falling in love with his assistant. Victoria paged through them with obvious satisfaction. This is good, really good. And the public humiliation. You said neighbors filmed it? It's already on social media, Jennifer said, her voice tight. Mrs. Patterson's daughter posted it on TikTok. It has 60,000 views. Perfect. We'll use that too. The judge is going to love your husband. Victoria set down the folder and looked directly at Jennifer. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What do you really want out of this? Is it revenge? Justice? Financial compensation? Because those are different goals and require different strategies. Jennifer thought about Derek's face when he'd called her disgusting, about Brittany spitting at her feet, about 12 years of love and loyalty repaid with public cruelty. She thought about the wedding invitation, designed specifically to humiliate her one final time. I want him to know, Jennifer said slowly, that he made the worst mistake of his life. I want him to lie awake at night, understanding exactly what he threw away. But most of all, she paused, crystallizing the feeling that had been building since she'd read that email. Most of all, I want to walk into that wedding and show him that I don't need him, that I never needed him, that everything he valued about himself, his business success, his money, his status, all of it is nothing compared to what I've accomplished. I want him to see me and realize he's been punching so far above his weight that it's pathetic. Victoria's smile was genuine now. Then we're going to make sure you have exactly what you need to make that entrance. But Jennifer, I need to be clear about something. The best revenge isn't making him regret losing you. It's being so genuinely successful and happy that he becomes irrelevant to your story. Are you prepared for that? For truly letting go and building something new? I already am, Jennifer said and meant it. The divorce, the humiliation, it hurts, but it also freed me to see myself clearly for the first time in years. I've been making myself small for Derek, apologizing for my body, for my ambitions, for taking up space. I'm done with that. The contract, the research, the future, that's all me. Derek was just background noise I mistook for a partner. Good, Victoria said briskly, pulling out paperwork. Then let's get started. First, we file the counter petition and injunction to freeze all marital assets pending investigation. That means Derek can't sell the house or move any more money. Second, we're going to have a forensic accountant go through every financial transaction you've made as a couple. Third, I'm going to need you to document every contribution you made to his business and education. And fourth, she paused considering. Fourth, we're going to wait to reveal your NIH contract until absolutely the last moment, because the look on his face when he discovers what you're worth will be priceless. Over the next 3 hours, Jennifer signed documents, provided information, and watched Victoria systematically build a case that would demolish Derek's attempt to leave the marriage with everything. The lawyer was thorough, asking questions Jennifer hadn't even considered about whose name was on various accounts, who had signed what loans, what informal agreements she and Derek had made over the years. He's going to be served with the counter petition tomorrow, Victoria said as they wrapped up. I'm guessing he's going to be shocked and angry. He clearly thought you'd just roll over and accept his terms. When he realizes you're fighting back, he's going to try to intimidate you. Maybe he'll have Brittany call you, or he'll send threatening messages, or he'll try to turn your friends against you. Are you prepared for that? My friends already know what he did, Jennifer said. The good ones are horrified. The ones who aren't, I guess I know where they stand now, too. What about work? Does Derek know about your research? He knows I work in pharmaceutical research, but he's never asked for details. He always said my job was boring and changed the subject whenever I tried to talk about it. Jennifer felt a familiar pang of hurt, quickly replaced by anger. He had no idea what I was working on, no idea what it meant. He never bothered to learn. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Keep it that way as long as possible. The element of surprise is your greatest weapon right now. Let him think you're just a dumped wife scrambling for scraps. Let him and Brittany plan their perfect wedding and feel smug about putting you in the front row to witness your replacement. And then, her smile turned predatory, then you walk in and show them what real success looks like? Jennifer left the lawyer's office feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that Derek would come back or that things would return to how they were, but hope for something entirely new. She stopped at a boutique on the way back to her hotel, not to buy an outfit for the wedding. It was still too early for that. But to buy something for herself that she'd always wanted but never purchased, because Derek would have commented on the cost or the style or how it would look on her body. She bought a cashmere sweater in deep blue, soft and expensive, and utterly impractical. When she put it on in the dressing room, she looked at herself in the mirror and saw not the fat wife Derek had discarded, but a woman who was still standing, still fighting, still valuable despite every cruel word he'd thrown at her. The woman looking back at her had soft curves and tired eyes and the beginning of smile lines, and she was worth $700 million. Not because of her body, but because of her brilliant mind and years of dedicated work. Jennifer bought the sweater and wore it out of the store. Then she went back to her hotel room and started planning. She had 3 weeks until the wedding, 3 weeks to finalize her NIH contract, secure her research lab space, and prepare for the moment when Derek would realize exactly what he destroyed when he threw her belongings in the snow. Derek's call came at 2 a.m., 2 days after he'd been served with Jennifer's counterpetition. His voice through the phone was barely controlled rage. Jennifer, who'd been expecting this, sat up in her hotel bed and put him on speaker so she could record the conversation. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Derek shouted, not bothering with a greeting. "An injunction? You froze my accounts. I have a wedding to pay for." "Actually, you have a wedding to cancel," Jennifer said calmly. "Because unless Victoria tells me otherwise, you can't afford it anymore. That joint account you stole from? That's theft, Derek. Actual criminal theft from marital property. It was my money. I earned it. Actually, forensic accounting shows that over our 12-year marriage, I contributed approximately 68% more to our joint finances than you did. Would you like to see the breakdown? Because Victoria has spreadsheets, lots of spreadsheets." The silence on the other end was gratifying. Jennifer could practically hear Derek's mind working, trying to figure out how his simple plan to discard his unwanted wife had become so complicated. "You can't do this," he said finally. "I'm marrying Brittany next month. I've already sent the invitations. The venue is booked. You're just bitter and trying to ruin things because you can't stand that I'm happy." "I'm doing this because you committed fraud," Jennifer corrected. "You emptied our joint account without permission, destroyed my personal property, and attempted to force me into a divorce settlement that gave you everything and left me homeless. Did you really think I'd just accept that?" "You're broke," Derek's voice rose again. "You can't afford a lawyer like Victoria Martinez. How are you even paying for this?" Jennifer smiled in the darkness of her hotel room. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. The moment she could plant the first seed of doubt in Derek's confident assumption that he held all the power. "That's interesting, Derek. You spent 12 years married to me, and you have no idea what I'm capable of or what I'm worth. You never asked about my work, never cared about my research, never bothered to learn anything about what I do all day. You just assumed I was boring and fat and easily disposed of. That was your first mistake." "What are you talking about?" Something in Derek's voice shifted, uncertainty creeping in under the anger. "You'll find out," Jennifer said pleasantly. "In the meantime, enjoy your frozen accounts and your very expensive lawyer trying to explain to a judge why you thought you could steal from your wife and get away with it. Oh, and Derek, that wedding invitation you sent me? I'm still planning to attend. I wouldn't miss it for anything." She hung up before he could respond, her heart racing. It was petty, maybe, to bait him like that, to hint at secrets she wasn't ready to reveal. But after years of making herself small and quiet and apologetic for existing, Jennifer found that standing up for herself felt exhilarating. The next call came from Brittany, less than an hour later. Jennifer almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "You bitter bitch," Brittany hissed without preamble. "You're destroying Derek's life because you can't handle that he upgraded. You need to drop this lawsuit and accept reality. Nobody wants you. You're fat and pathetic, and you're just making yourself look worse by fighting this." "Interesting perspective," Jennifer said, her voice still calm. "Tell me, Brittany, does Derek know you were still sleeping with your ex-boyfriend Marcus while you were starting your affair with him? Because I have the screenshots of your messages. Should I send them to Derek, or would you like to do that yourself?" The shocked silence was delicious. Jennifer hadn't been sure those screenshots from a mutual friend would be useful, but clearly they were. "You're bluffing," Brittany said, but her voice wavered. "Am I? Test me. Keep calling me names. Keep trying to intimidate me and find out exactly how much ammunition I have. Or, and here's a crazy thought, you could stay out of this and let Derek deal with the consequences of his own choices. Either way, I'll see you at the wedding. Make sure you save me a good seat in the front row like you promised." Jennifer hung up and blocked both numbers. She was done being accessible to their abuse. They'd had their fun humiliating her in public, stealing from her, destroying her belongings. Now they could deal with the reality that actions had consequences and that the soft, quiet, supposedly weak wife they discarded had teeth after all. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity that would have been overwhelming if Jennifer hadn't been running on pure determination. She met with the NIH team and signed the preliminary contract paperwork. She toured 3 potential lab spaces and chose one in a gleaming new research facility with floor-to-ceiling windows and state-of-the-art equipment. She hired her first 2 research assistants, both brilliant recent PhD graduates who were thrilled to work on her protocol. She opened new bank accounts that had nothing to do with Derek or their marriage. She bought a car, not fancy but reliable and entirely hers. And she found an apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom place with a small balcony and a view of the river. It wasn't enormous or ostentatious, but it was hers alone, a space where she could breathe and think and be herself without constantly managing Derek's opinions about her body or her worth. She signed the lease and spent an afternoon moving in her few remaining possessions, building something new from almost nothing. Victoria called with updates almost daily. The forensic accountant had found irregularities in Derek's business finances, suggesting he'd been siphoning money from the company for months to fund his affair with Brittany. The judge had extended the injunction on marital assets and ordered Derek to return the stolen funds to the joint account with penalties. Derek's lawyer had tried to push for a quick settlement, but Victoria had declined, preferring to let Derek twist in the wind a bit longer. "He's desperate," Victoria told Jennifer during one of their strategy sessions. "He keeps trying to get me to reveal what you're hiding. He knows there's something. He can feel it. It's driving him crazy that you're not begging him to take you back or falling apart or giving him the satisfaction of seeing you destroyed." "Good," Jennifer said. "Let him wonder. How's the wedding planning going?" "According to my sources, and by sources I mean Derek's panicked emails to his lawyer, the venue is demanding full payment by Friday or they're canceling. His accounts are frozen. Brittany's family isn't wealthy enough to cover it. He's trying to borrow from friends and business associates, but word has gotten out about the divorce lawsuit, and people are suddenly much less interested in lending him money." Victoria's smile was evident even over the phone. "Your husband is discovering that being publicly exposed as a thief and abuser of your spouse is bad for business relationships. Is the wedding still happening?" "As of right now, yes. He managed to scrape together enough for a bare-bones version. Smaller venue, cheaper catering, no band. It's this Sunday. Are you still planning to attend?" Jennifer looked at the dress hanging in her closet, the one she'd purchased for this specific occasion. It wasn't revealing or tight or designed to show off weight loss because there hadn't been significant weight loss, and Jennifer had decided she didn't care. Instead, it was elegant and well-tailored and expensive, the kind of dress that spoke of success and confidence without shouting. She'd paired it with jewelry she'd inherited from her grandmother, simple but real diamonds that sparkled with old money, quiet dignity. "I'll be there," Jennifer confirmed. "Front row, like they invited me." Sunday morning dawned cold and bright, February delivering one last blast of winter before surrendering to spring. Jennifer stood in front of her apartment mirror, adjusting the dress one final time. She'd done her makeup carefully, hired a hairstylist to come to her apartment, and she looked good. Not thin, not transformed by some Hollywood makeover montage, but polished and professional and like exactly what she was. A successful research scientist about to step into the biggest opportunity of her career. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Judge signed the final order this morning. All findings in your favor. Derek owes you $387,000 in restitution plus penalties. I'm emailing you the details now. Go enjoy the wedding. You've earned this. Jennifer read the message twice, letting the reality settle in. $387,000. Every penny she'd put into Derek's education and business, plus interest, plus penalties for the stolen joint account, plus compensation for her destroyed property. It wasn't about the money anymore. Not really. It was about the acknowledgement that her contributions had mattered, that her sacrifice had been real, that she hadn't imagined the 12 years she'd spent building Derek up while he'd been secretly tearing her down. She arrived at the wedding venue, not the prestigious Riverside Country Club Derek had promised Brittany, but a significantly more modest event space in a suburban hotel, 30 minutes early. The parking lot was already filling with cars, guests arriving in their Sunday best to watch Derek and Brittany seal their love story with vows and expensive flower arrangements. Jennifer parked and sat in her car for a moment, gathering her courage. This was it, the moment she'd been building toward for 3 weeks. She could turn around right now, skip the wedding, live her successful life without subjecting herself to the spectacle of her ex-husband marrying his mistress. But that would mean letting Derek think he'd won, that she'd been too hurt or too ashamed to face them. Jennifer got out of the car and walked toward the venue entrance. Her heels clicked on the pavement with satisfying authority. She'd worn her good coat, the one she'd bought during a business trip to New York 2 years ago, when Derek was too busy with his startup to notice what she purchased. Under it, the dress moved with her confidently, and she'd stopped caring somewhere between the divorce papers and the NIH contract whether Derek thought she looked good. She looked successful, and that was infinitely better. The venue's lobby was decorated with white flowers and silver ribbons, clearly attempting elegance on a limited budget. Guests milled around, chatting in small groups, and Jennifer recognized several people from Derek's business circles. She also noticed the looks they gave her: surprise, curiosity, and in some cases, something that looked like respect. Word had clearly spread about the divorce lawsuit and Derek's frozen accounts. Jennifer? A familiar voice made her turn. It was Michael Chen, one of Derek's business partners from the early startup days. He was looking at her with obvious concern. I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry, Derek can be... Well, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jennifer said graciously. It's been an adjustment, but I'm doing well. Are you sure you want to be here? This seems... Michael trailed off, clearly struggling to find polite words for the absurd cruelty of forcing your ex-wife to attend your wedding to your mistress. I was invited, Jennifer said with a slight smile. Front row seat, actually. Derek and Brittany insisted. Michael's expression darkened. That's unconscionable. Look, if you need to leave, I'll walk you out. You don't have to put yourself through this. I appreciate that, Jennifer said warmly, but I'm exactly where I want to be. She moved past him into the main ceremony space, and immediately she felt every eye in the room turn toward her. The bride's side and groom's side were starting to fill up, people taking their seats for the ceremony. Jennifer walked down the aisle, a literal aisle, white carpet and flower petals and all, and took her seat in the front row on the groom's side, exactly where Brittany's vindictive invitation had designated. The murmurs started immediately. She could feel the scandal radiating out like ripples in water, people leaning toward each other to whisper, phones coming out to text mutual friends. Jennifer sat calmly, her coat still on, her hands folded in her lap, and waited. Derek appeared from a side door, flanked by his groomsmen. He looked good in his tuxedo, Jennifer had to admit, handsome and confident and completely unprepared for what he was about to see. His eyes swept the crowd, acknowledging guests, and then they landed on Jennifer sitting front row center. His entire body froze. The color drained from his face. He'd clearly assumed she wouldn't actually come. that the invitation had been a cruel joke she'd be too humiliated to accept. But here she was, calm and composed and completely unbothered by his presence. Jennifer smiled at him. Not a warm smile, but not vindictive either. Just the smile of someone who knew something he didn't, who held cards he couldn't see. Derek stared at her for a long moment, and she watched confusion and anger and something else. Was that fear? Cross his features before he looked away. The ceremony began. Brittany walked down the aisle in a white dress that probably cost 3 months of Jennifer's old salary, her face glowing with triumph until she spotted Jennifer in the front row. Her steps faltered. Her smile flickered. But she recovered, lifting her chin and proceeding to Derek's side with determined grace. The officiant began the ceremony, talking about love and commitment and partnership with what seemed like deliberate irony, given the circumstances. Jennifer listened politely, her mind partly on the proceedings and partly on the research protocols she'd been developing for her upcoming lab work. She'd start hiring more staff next week, begin the preliminary testing phase within the month. Her real life was just beginning, while Derek's was contracting into this desperate attempt to prove he'd made the right choice. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. The traditional words hung in the air, and Jennifer felt everyone in the room hold their breath, wondering if she would speak. She could. She could stand up right now and tell them all about Brittany's continued affair with Marcus, about Derek's financial fraud, about the systematic abuse and theft. She could destroy this wedding with a few words. Instead, Jennifer remained silent, not because she was holding her peace, but because she had something so much better than a dramatic scene. She had the truth, documented and proven, and waiting for exactly the right moment. Then, by the power vested in me, the officiant continued, relief evident in his voice, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Derek kissed Brittany with what seemed like excessive enthusiasm, as if trying to prove to everyone watching that this was real love, that he'd made the right choice. When they turned to face the audience, Brittany's eyes found Jennifer immediately, her expression a mixture of triumph and confusion. Why was the fat ex-wife sitting there so calmly? Where was the tears, the outburst, the satisfying breakdown? The reception followed immediately, guests filtering into an adjacent room where tables were set up for the meal. Jennifer was seated predictably at a table in the back corner away from the head table, the wedding equivalent of exile. She didn't care. She'd come for one specific moment, and it was approaching rapidly. Dinner was served, chicken or fish, the standard wedding options, and Jennifer ate slowly, watching Derek and Brittany at the head table. They kept looking at her, whispering to each other, clearly thrown by her presence and composure. Brittany said something that made Derek laugh, but it sounded forced, and his eyes kept darting back to Jennifer as if trying to figure out what game she was playing. The speeches began. The best man told embarrassing stories about Derek's college days. Brittany's maid of honor talked about how Brittany deserved the world and had finally found someone worthy of her. No one mentioned Jennifer or the divorce or the elephant in the room that everyone was too polite to acknowledge. Then it was time for toasts. Derek stood raising his glass and began to thank everyone for coming to celebrate his and Brittany's love. He was in the middle of a sentence about new beginnings when his phone sitting on the head table began to buzz. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Brittany's phone started buzzing too. Then the best man's phone. Then multiple guests throughout the room were pulling out their phones, their expressions changing from celebration to shock to something that looked like horror. Jennifer's phone buzzed in her small clutch. She pulled it out and opened the news alert she'd been expecting. Local researcher awarded $700 million NIH contract for revolutionary cancer treatment. The article was detailed and glowing, complete with photos of Jennifer in her lab, quotes from NIH officials praising her protocol's potential, and a comprehensive breakdown of exactly what the 7-year contract entailed. It had been scheduled to publish at exactly 7:01 p.m., right in the middle of Derek and Brittany's reception. She watched Derek read something on his phone, watched his face go from confused to shocked to absolutely stricken. Brittany was reading over his shoulder, her expression transforming from smug victory to dawning horror. Around the room, guests were whispering, showing each other their phones, and gradually every eye in the reception turned toward Jennifer. She stood up slowly, gracefully, and removed her coat. The dress underneath was a deep emerald green that brought out her eyes, professionally tailored to fit her body perfectly. She looked exactly like what she was, a successful scientist who was about to change the face of modern medicine. "Derek," Jennifer said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Brittany, thank you so much for inviting me to your wedding. I wouldn't have missed this for anything." She set her coat on her chair and walked toward the exit, every step measured and confident. As she passed the head table, she paused. "Oh, and Derek, you asked me how I could afford Victoria Martinez. That $700 million contract should cover it. Enjoy your marriage. I hope Brittany's half as supportive of your business dreams as I was, though I suppose you'll find out now that all your accounts are frozen and you owe me nearly $400,000 in restitution." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Brittany had gone absolutely white, her phone still in her hand showing the article about Jennifer's contract. The room was so quiet Jennifer could hear her own heartbeat. "Goodbye, Derek," Jennifer said softly, and walked out of the reception hall with her head held high. She made it to her car before the shaking started, before the reality of what had just happened crashed over her in waves of disbelief and triumph, and something that felt almost like grief for the 12 years she'd wasted on a man who'd never valued her at all. But underneath the complicated emotions was something solid and real: freedom. The door was closed on that chapter of her life, and ahead of her stretched infinite possibility. Research that would save lives, work that mattered, a future built entirely on her own terms. Jennifer sat in her car and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes, mourning the marriage she'd thought she had, and the husband she'd believed in, and the version of herself who'd made herself small to make room for Derek's ego. Then she dried her eyes, fixed her makeup in the rearview mirror, and drove toward her new apartment and her new life, leaving Derek and Brittany in their disastrous wedding reception in the dust where they belonged. Behind her, she didn't see Derek chase her into the parking lot, didn't hear him calling her name, didn't watch him try to run after her car as she drove away. She didn't see Brittany standing in the venue doorway, no longer glowing with triumph, but calculating what it meant to be married to a man whose ex-wife was worth $700 million and who owed that same ex-wife nearly $500,000 in restitution. She didn't see the wedding guests slowly filing out, their conversation no longer about Derek and Brittany's love story, but about Jennifer Hayes and her revolutionary cancer protocol, and how Derek had thrown away the opportunity of a lifetime because he'd been too shallow to see value in anything except a thin waist and a pretty face. Jennifer didn't need to see any of that. She already knew that walking away from Derek was the best decision she'd never meant to make, and that his decision to throw her out in the snow was the beginning of her becoming someone extraordinary. The revenge she'd worried about, planned for, carefully orchestrated, it turned out to be almost beside the point. The real victory wasn't Derek's shock or Brittany's horror or the wedding guest's gasps. The real victory was Jennifer driving toward a future where Derek was just a footnote in her story, a brief chapter of pain that led to the work that would define her life. By the time she pulled into her apartment building's parking lot, Jennifer was smiling. Not the polite smile she'd worn at the wedding or the vindictive smile of revenge successfully executed, but the genuine smile of someone who'd survived something terrible and come out the other side stronger than before. She had research to do, lives to save, and a brilliant career to build. Derek and Brittany could figure out their own mess. Jennifer Hayes was finally beautifully free,